welcome back. And today I'll be telling you the story of Savitri and Satyavan. And this has become suddenly such a huge trend. So, without further ado, let's jump on with the trend, yeah? Savitri and Satyavan. Long ago, there lived a king and queen who had no children. For 18 years, the king prayed day and night for a child. Finally, one evening, a beautiful woman appeared to him in the flames on the altar where he prayed. "I am Savitri," she said, smiling kindly. "I am the daughter of the sun, and I have heard your prayers. You will soon have a daughter." The king was overjoyed. Within a year, his wife gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and they named her Savitri after the goddess. Young Savitri grew to be intelligent, kind, and so radiantly lovely that she almost appeared to glow. Some people even believed that she was a goddess herself. But in spite of her beauty, or perhaps because of it, no man asked her to marry him. And in those days, getting married was what all young ladies did when they reached a certain age. "The men are too weak," said her adoring father, trying to console her. "They find your beauty intimidating. If you wish to marry, you go out and find a husband yourself, but find one who is strong enough and good enough for you." Savitri agreed. She was ready to get married and she liked the idea of choosing her own husband. So she set off, along with her servants, a string of advisors, and a band of warriors to protect her. They journeyed for many weeks, moving from one town to another, until they finally came across a hermitage, a small settlement where a group of people lived together, devoting their lives to worshipping and serving the gods. Savitri was introducing herself to the religious leader when she noticed a young man leading an elderly blind man. The young man had eyes that shone brightly, but were also so full of kindness that Savitri was immediately drawn to him. "Who is he?" she asked, intrigued. "Ah, that is Prince Satyavan," the holy man answered with a fond smile. "He is the son of the old king. There with him, his father lost his kingdom, but his son is always by his side to guide and look after him." "Satyavan," Savitri whispered, trying out his name on her tongue. "What an unusual name." "It means son of truth, princess," replied the holy man, "and nothing was ever more appropriate. If there lives a more virtuous young man than Prince Satyavan, I have yet to meet him." Savitri smiled to herself, and Satyavan, passing by her, just then smiled back, his eyes lighting up even more. Savitri felt her heart skip a beat. "This is the man I shall marry," she whispered to herself. Feeling deliriously happy and almost dizzy with excitement, Savitri returned to her father's palace. When she arrived, the king was deep in conversation with his advisor Narada, a holy man. Delighted to see his beloved daughter again and thrilled that she looked so happy, he leaped up to greet her. "Have you found yourself a husband?" he asked. "Yes, father, I have," Savitri replied. "His name is Satyavan. He is a prince and very handsome. But father, he is also kind." And the king was about to congratulate her when Narada interrupted them with a horrified look on his face. "Oh no, princess, you cannot marry him." Savitri was lost for words for a moment. Then, "But why not? He is perfect," she said, and blushed. "Oh, princess," Narada replied, "he is indeed most worthy. Indeed, no man could be more worthy of you than Satyavan. But you cannot marry him. He will be dead 1 year from today." There was a stunned silence. Narada was not simply a holy man, he was also well known for being able to see into the future. If he could see Satyavan's death, there was no doubt that it would happen. "You must find another husband, my dear," the king said sadly, taking Savitri's hand in his daughter's lip with trembling but a determined look that he knew well was forming on her face, and she pulled her hands away. No, father, she said firmly. I will marry him. He is the one I have chosen, and I want to share his life, however long or short it is. So the king agreed. It had always been hard for him to refuse his daughter anything she asked, especially when she usually asked for so little. And when Satyavan heard that Savitri wanted to marry him, he was overjoyed too. His father, the blind king, was happy too, but also worried. Can you live a life such as we live here, princess? He asked, taking Savitri aside when she returned to the hermitage. We have no rich food or beautiful clothes here. Can you live wearing just a plain robe of rough cloth and eat only wild plants and fruits? Oh, yes, Savitri declared. I do not care what hardships I have to suffer. I do not care if I am here or in the palace, as long as I can be with Satyavan. The following day, the two were married, and for almost a year they lived in blissful happiness. But as the year was drawing to a close, Savitri began to worry more and more about Nerada's prediction and the fate of her beloved husband. 3 days before the day on which Nerada had said he would die, she entered the great religious hall. There she remained for the next 3 days and nights, not sleeping, not eating, just praying and praying and praying desperately that Satyavan might be saved. Before dawn on the fourth day, her husband laid his hand on her shoulder. Savitri, all this prayer and fasting is good, but why be so hard on yourself? Come, eat and sleep. Savitri couldn't bear to tell him why she was praying so hard. I will just stay a little longer, my love, was all she could say. When she finally left the temple, the sun was rising and she saw her husband heading into the forest. What are you doing, husband? She called out, her forehead furrowing with fear. Only going into the forest to chop wood, he replied. A pang of fear shot through her and made her shudder. Let me come with you, she pleaded. Satyavan shook his head. No, you should stay here and rest, my love. But Savitri was not to be put off. No, I will come too. My heart is set on it. She gave him one of her winning smiles that he could never resist. Very well, he smiled in return. So they went into the woods. Soon, Satyavan found a fallen tree to chop up into firewood, but he had only chopped a basket worth of log when he stopped abruptly and staggered where he stood. Savitri felt her blood run cold. What's wrong? I suddenly have a terrible headache, Satyavan gasped, sinking into the ground, and I feel so very weak. Trying not to panic, Savitri persuaded him to lie down and rest his head on her lap. I feel as if I am on fire, he murmured. His words slurred. He closed his eyes and his breathing became slower and shallower. Looking up, Savitri saw a figure approaching. His skin was a deep midnight blue and seemed to shine. He was wearing a blood-red cloak, and when he came close, she realized to her horror that his eyes were glowing red. Who are you? She stammered as he reached the tree where she and her husband were resting. Princess, I am Yama, the Lord of Death. You see me only because of your prayers. It is your husband times. I have come to take him. With that, the man reached into Satyavan's chest. His hand passed through flesh and bone as if they were water and pulled out a tiny figurine that looked exactly like Satyavan. Immediately, Satyavan stopped breathing. Yama put the figurine inside his robe and smiled kindly at Savitri. Do not be sad, my dear. Happiness awaits your husband in my kingdom. He was a good man and he will be rewarded. Then he turned and strode away. Savitri was stunned for a second before she quickly stood up and ran after him. But my lord, it is my duty as a wife to stay by my husband's side, and I know your duty is to take him, but I must stay. I must stay with him. And your duty is over now, princess. Your husband is dead, Yama said gently. but I admire your loyalty. I will grant you one wish, as long as it's not that your husband comes back to life. Savitri thought for a moment. Thank you, Lord Yama. In that case, please restore my father-in-law's kingdom and his sight. Let him see again. Yama nodded. It will be done. Now I must take your husband to my kingdom. You cannot follow. And he set off once more, perhaps a little more briskly than before. But Savitri ran after him. Yama reached a river bank lined with thorns and sharp branches. He passed through them untouched, but they tore at Savitri's clothes and left beads of blood on her skin. You cannot come any further, Savitri, Yama said, frowning at her. My kingdom is no place for you. But I must stay with Satyavan, she insisted. I know he will find happiness in your kingdom, but you are carrying my happiness away. I love him. Even love cannot conquer death, Yama replied. But your love and devotion are impressive. I will grant you another wish, as long as it is not that your husband returns to life. Then Savitri thought quickly. I ask that my father have many more children. It shall be so, Yama said with a nod of his head. Again he set off, and again Savitri followed. Yama went up a steep hill, seeming to glide up as if he was skating on ice. Savitri clambered after him, her breathing heavy and ragged by the time they reached the top. There, Yama looked at her and sighed. Savitri, I command you to go back. You cannot come where we are going. I will not tell you again, but I do admire your bravery and persistence. I will grant you one last wish, as long as it is not that I bring your husband back to life. Savitri took a deep breath. And in that case, I ask that I may have many children. Yama nodded, but she hadn't yet finished, and that they all be Satyavans. Yama's eyes grew wide. Then he let out a long, loud laugh. You are very clever, princess. I must grant you your wish, but I cannot grant it unless Satyavan lives. So be it. Yama took the figurine from inside his robe and let it loose. Go, Savitri. You have won your husband. The sun was almost setting when Savitri settled her husband's head back on her lap. His chest began to rise and fall, and his eyes slowly opened. Goodness, he said, yawning. I must have fallen asleep, and in the middle of the day too, he smiled at her. Then quickly frowned. Whatever's wrong, Savitri? What has made you smile and cry at the same time? Nothing, my love, she replied. Let's go home. Yama was true to his promise. Satyavan's father regained his sight and won back his kingdom, and Savitri's father had many more children. Satyavan and Savitri also had many children and eventually became king and queen themselves. They lived a long and happy life together, and when at last Yama came to take them both to his kingdom, they went without a murmur. The end. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and if you liked today's video, smash that like button and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!